Hello and welcome to This Really Happened, a place where unbelievable, heart-touching true stories come to life. Sometimes surprising, sometimes bittersweet, always real. Grab a drink and settle in. We're about to begin. The air was filled with an elusive fragrance, aptly called the scent of luxury. It held a sense of lightness, pride, and at the same time an almost ethereal weightlessness. It seemed as though skilled perfumers had blended the warmth of wood, the sweetness of vanilla, and barely perceptible notes of tropical flowers into this captivating aroma. Creating something similar at home felt impossible. This is how upscale hotels, exquisite restaurants, or boutiques of famous brands smell. I could just sit here in this armchair, Mandy said dreamily, watching the bubbles dance in her glass of sparkling wine. In moments like these, it feels like the whole world revolves just around you. Not sure about the whole world, but that sales assistant over there definitely does, Lila chuckled, nodding towards the store employee. Meanwhile, the assistant gracefully approached the friends, holding several outfits. I'm going to try this on. Mandy left her glass of unfinished champagne on the table and disappeared behind the thick curtain of the fitting room. The attentive employee carefully held the hem of Mandy's own skirt, eager to please in every way. When is the celebration scheduled? Lila inquired, casually crossing one leg over the other. Oh, in just a couple of days, came the reply from behind the curtain. One of Roger's friends proposed to his girlfriend, and they decided to celebrate the event in style. You know, like in American movies. There'll be a cocktail party, fireworks, live music. For this occasion, he rented a luxurious country villa with a pool and garden. In short, I want to show up there with my little Roger in all my glory. I wish I lived like that, Lila sighed, finishing the last of her champagne. If they're spending this much on the engagement, what will the wedding itself be like? Mandy slid the curtain open with a slight jingle and appeared in a sequined dress with a dramatically open back. The assistant immediately began showering her with compliments. Lila critically assessed her friend's appearance and frowned. There were still plenty of dresses left on the rack. There was absolutely no need to rush. After 2 more glasses of champagne, the friends finally left the shopping centre with their treasured bags and headed towards the parking lot to wait for a taxi. Mandy had married a man with good prospects 6 months prior. Roger held the position of director at a prestigious car dealership. Mandy didn't hesitate to tell her friends that she had stolen her husband from some drab nurse. As soon as their relationship was legalized, she immediately quit her job and began hatching plans for her own small business. She felt no remorse for her actions. She believed she had simply taken from a grey mouse what had, by some ridiculous chance, ended up near him. Lila listened but was in no hurry to repeat Mandy's feats. She believed in karma and preferred to achieve everything herself. Now we need to go get shoes. That's at a different boutique. I called them, and they promised to set them aside until I arrive. So we need to... Mandy's suddenly animated flow of speech abruptly stopped. Need to what? Lila looked up at her friend, and only then noticed that Mandy had frozen, staring somewhere into the parking lot. Lila turned around. Beside an expensive black car, a driver in an impeccably white shirt and dark trousers was helping a short woman in a light dress load shopping bags into the trunk. Then he opened the rear passenger door for the lady, whose appearance spoke of her high status. Mandy, what's wrong? Lila waved a hand in front of her friend's face. Hey! Mandy shook her head, squeezed her eyes shut. Lila, either my eyesight is failing or I've completely lost my mind, she finally managed to say. But I swear, Roger's ex-wife, that same frump, just got into that car. No, absolutely not. I would have recognized her right away, Lila objected. It's her, just with a different hairstyle and in a dress that costs as much as her monthly salary at the hospital. And yeah, with a personal chauffeur, Lila chuckled. No, Mandy, that's just a similar-looking lady, obviously. Who would hire such an escort for a nurse from a communal apartment? Mandy understood there was sense in her friend's words, but her eyes had seen something completely different just minutes ago. Could Roger have been so wrong? Could his ex-wife have transformed into such a fashionable creature, driving around in foreign cars with a driver? So are we going? The taxi is waiting, Lila asked, nodding towards it. Yeah, her friend replied distractedly. Roger surveyed his desk. Everything was perfect, every item in its place. The monthly sales plan was exceeded, the bonus was already in his pocket, the new manager, Jean, had settled in, and the contract for the supply of new cars was signed. Flawless. On days like these, Roger was in an excellent mood. He descended from the second floor, where his office with panoramic windows was located, to the first, and observed the hustle and bustle of the young employees trying to please customers. He immediately sent a young female employee for coffee and sat down in her spot, lounging in the chair and surveying his domain. Roger had been the director of the car dealership for about 10 months. He himself had come here years ago, young and inexperienced, but in 4 years he had rapidly climbed the career ladder to the very top. The showroom doors silently slid open, and a visitor entered. Roger watched as the new manager immediately headed towards him. Having worked in sales for many years, Roger had become adept at distinguishing wealthy clients from those who came merely to gawk or waste time. This man evoked a feeling of disgust in Roger. Dishevelled appearance, worn-out jeans, sloppily rolled-up sleeves of a simple shirt, dirty sneakers. Jean offered the man a catalogue, but the man clearly stumped the young employee. Roger impatiently clicked his tongue and decided to intervene. Jean, take a break. I'll handle this, he approached, nodded to the newcomer, temporarily taking over his duties. How can I help you? Good afternoon, the customer greeted Roger. I want to buy a surprise for my wife's birthday, but I see you don't have the car in the colour I need. He named the model and gestured around the showroom. Roger remembered that this colour was only available for the top trim vehicle, and it cost significantly more. Such cars were brought in strictly by special order. Unfortunately, it's not in stock, but it can be ordered. If you make a down payment of 30% of the cost, the delivery time is about 3 weeks. The director squinted, evaluating the customer again. No, that's too long. What if I pay the full amount right away? Will it be faster? Roger was astonished, but outwardly showed none of his true feelings. Yes, of course, but in that case, full prepayment is required. He stretched his lips into something resembling a smile. Then we can deliver it in 5 days. We need to draw up a contract. Roger waved his hand, and Jean obligingly handed him a document form. The dealership director extended the contract to the customer. The man quickly scanned the lines, turned the page, and then asked, It says here that in case of any problems with the vehicle at the time of its transfer to the buyer, you are not responsible for it. Yes, those are the terms for expedited delivery, Roger confirmed. Are you offering me to buy a pig in a poke? The customer closed the contract, shook his head in dissatisfaction, and returned the papers to the man standing before him. Thank you, but I'll look for a gift for my wife elsewhere. Good day. He turned and headed for the exit. Roger rolled his eyes and, clearly thinking he wasn't heard, muttered, Coming from their village. The man paused for a moment in the doorway, but then left the car dealership building. Remember, Jean, Roger thrust the unused contract into the employee's hands. "Don't even waste your time on people like that. They have no money, but their demands are outrageous. And call the cleaner or something to wipe the floor after him." That evening, Roger picked up his wife. Mandy and Lila had spent the entire day together, preparing for the upcoming social event. They had talked their fill, laughed a lot, and made a bunch of purchases. The couple's favourite pastime was gossiping about acquaintances. "I swear on my new shoes that was your ex-wife," Mandy declared confidently. Roger listened with interest, but winced and waved it off dismissively. "Where would she get money for shopping sprees and business-class taxis? I beg you, I won the apartment in court. That chicken will certainly not grow up to be a chief doctor. All she has left is a communal hovel and a suitcase of old things." "What if she inherited something?" Mandy suggested. "Did you see them in Dunino? Her mother and father live in a one-room apartment on the outskirts. Her grandmother signed over her room to her when she was 15. They haven't remembered their niece in a long time. In short, that definitely wasn't Alice. Calm down." Mandy leaned back in her seat with a sense of satisfaction. Her husband's words reassured her. The thought that her ex-wife, whom she considered a nobody, could afford to buy shoes in boutiques stung her deeply. "No, she can't, period." "Roger, why did you ever get involved with her? Couldn't you find anyone better?" Mandy giggled. "I was young, foolish," the man replied in the same tone. "Didn't know much about women." As he said this, Roger took Mandy's hand and touched his lips to her knuckles. "Well, anyway, I'm sure my eyes deceived me in the parking lot today," Mandy concluded. "How was your day?" she asked, leaning against her husband. "A penniless, sloppy time-waster came to our dealership after lunch," Roger began. Often, for some reason, life brings together people who are completely incompatible, and it's clearly visible from the outside. The lovers themselves initially don't notice how much their views on everything around them diverge, how friction and arguments arise more and more often, how much remains beyond the threshold of understanding, and how the person who once seemed loved sinks lower and lower on the priority list. Alice and Roger met at a mutual friend's wedding. That evening, the 29-year-old nurse fell in love with the groom's handsome 30-year-old friend. They danced a lot, talked, drank, and spent the whole evening together. And they left the celebration together. Both were single, tipsy, and couldn't resist the pleasure of spending the night together. A month later, Alice realized she was expecting a child. The news hit Roger like a blow to the head. At the time, he was working in a small private bicycle shop and was completely unprepared to become a father. But gentleman's honour prevailed, and the man asked Alice to marry him. The wedding was rushed, without much preparation. However, parents from both sides prepared a surprise. This money was almost enough to buy a new, spacious 2-room apartment. True, they took out a loan for the missing part, but that seemed like a minor detail, as neither of the future parents had their own good housing. Roger was renting a modest studio. Alice lived in a communal apartment inherited from her grandmother. In short, they weren't exactly living high on the hog. It wasn't easy for either of them to change their accustomed single lifestyle to married life. But Alice loved Roger blindly, and because of this, she forgave his harshness, rude words, and unfulfilled promises. Providence had its own plans for this union. In her 4th month of pregnancy, Alice lost the child. She herself was saved and spent about a week in the hospital, but no one ever gave a clear reason for the tragedy that occurred. Although the girl herself dreamed of becoming a mother and cried bitterly into her pillow at night. Roger, however, didn't seem too upset. On the contrary, he sighed with relief. He had other plans. "There will be more children," Alice said as they had dinner. "My dear, what children are you talking about now? You almost killed yourself the first time and you want more." Roger skillfully wielded his fork, not looking at his wife. "Let's live a little. Wait, get on our feet. You'll get checked out." Alice nodded sadly. She decided to listen, because her husband was probably right. You can't just blindly rush into the abyss like a cat. You need to calm down. 2 years flew by under this pretext. Roger was perfectly happy. He had a working, convenient wife, and he could devote all his energy to building his career. So, after visiting car dealerships, he realized that people who bought cars were not poor. This meant he could earn significantly more if only he gave it his all. And Roger gave it his all. First, he was appointed senior manager, and after some time, deputy director. That's when the man began to look at Alice with a certain disgust. After all, a dreary apartment always awaited him at home. Alice hadn't even changed her hairstyle once in the past 5 years. All she did was complain about hospital matters and her children. She had been running to doctors for years, and in free medicine, even with connections, nothing happened quickly. He was fed up. In the evenings, the man didn't even want to share a bed with his wife. Meanwhile, Roger started earning well. He bought himself a solid foreign car and increasingly expensive suits and the best gadgets. He quickly paid off the loan for the apartment, and women started giving him unambiguous signs of attention. Seeing these achievements, this aura of success, his wife with her melancholic, suffering mood simply didn't fit. In the end, Roger started an affair with Mandy, a pretty girl who worked next door in an insurance company office. He didn't have to hide their almost full-fledged relationship. Mandy wasn't bothered that her chosen one was married. She saw the disgust and contempt with which Roger spoke of his wife, and she herself had seen her photos more than once, whether on social media or elsewhere. Boring, in a cheap sweater, with a perpetual ponytail and a round face. Pathetic and unremarkable. He didn't have to specifically get a divorce. As soon as Roger learned that he was being considered for the position of director of the car dealership, he understood that Alice, with her lamentations and drabness, had to remain in the past. He himself filed for divorce. His shocked wife looked at him with tear-filled eyes, not understanding. "Why, Roger? What are you taking revenge for?" "What? Revenge? You're a misunderstanding, a hospital moth. What can you give me? Nothing. You can't give birth. You can't take care of yourself." Conclusion: you're just a grey moth yourself. Ugh, find someone on your level. I don't need a woman like that, and don't bother explaining yourself anymore. Roger began packing his things. Alice cried quietly while he rushed from the wardrobe to the dresser. She didn't fully understand what was happening until the end. She only understood when her ex-husband coldly won the apartment in court and ordered her to take her things from the semi-empty, once-beloved apartment and move into her grandmother's communal apartment. Her parents didn't have enough space, even without her. So, literally in a few weeks, from a married woman, Alice turned into an unremarkable, abandoned woman from a communal apartment. "Well, we're home." She stood before the door of her room, holding a suitcase in one hand and a cat carrier in the other. "Now everything will be like before." Felix, the cat, rubbed his cheek against the bars of the carrier, showing that it didn't matter to him where he lived as long as he was with his beloved mistress. Stepping into the space of her former home, Alice felt as if those years of marriage, the lost child, the divorce, and all the pain Roger had caused her had never happened. The lilac curtains still swayed cheerfully on the window, the spout of a teapot from her grandmother's set peeked out from the sideboard. Alice sat down on the sofa, leaned back, and closed her eyes, listening to herself. She needed to gather her strength and start life anew. No one had promised it would be easy, but sitting and crying from her own helplessness was definitely not the answer. Life took a new turn, and how much Alice would have paid to also chirp as carefree as the sparrows in the bushes. Instead, old wounds flared up in her soul with painful throbbing. She thought, trying to understand why. Periodically, her mother added fuel to this smouldering fire of painful reflections. There was a man. He worked, didn't drink, didn't fool around. No, they got divorced. How should I know, Mum? Alice waved her hand listlessly. You should have fought. You should have made a firm decision and filed suit again. Mum, leave me alone. Alice covered her ears like a child. I barely have the strength to get out of bed for work in the morning, let alone sue, and I don't have the money for a lawyer either. The conversation was exhausted. This repeated itself more than once. At first, her mother pitied her, and then she started to reproach her, a pattern that was annoying as hell. Alice had one outlet, work. She had worked as a nurse in a children's polyclinic for many years and loved what she did with all her heart. She dreamed of going further, to residency, but she could never save up the necessary amount for tuition. 3 weeks had passed since Alice moved back into her old place. It was unusual to return to a small room after a huge apartment. However, instead of a perpetually gloomy husband, she was met there by Felix the cat with joyful meows, and somehow, gradually, her heart felt warmer. The evening light of the fading day gently stroked the walls, casting long shadows, and lit up the windows with fiery reflections. One evening came to mind. Alice was returning home from work. She had stayed late with paperwork. To clear her head a little, she decided to walk. As luck would have it, the path led past the car dealership where her ex-husband worked. To avoid disturbing her memory and ruining her mood, Alice turned the other way, further away. The route was longer, but she didn't have to worry. She usually enjoyed strolling, looking at passing cars, shop windows, clouds in the sky, birds on wires, dogs dozing in the shade. And so today, Alice looked around, moving forward step by step. And suddenly, her gaze fell upon something that disturbed the evening tranquility. Ahead, in the parking lot, a car stood with its door half open. It was surprising that no one but Alice noticed it. The decision took less than a second. The woman darted into the parking lot and flung open the car door. A man was lying in the driver's seat, almost unconscious. He looked about 40, well-built, in a shirt, jeans, with a short, neat haircut. Blood weakly pulsed onto the seat. "Are you okay?" Alice asked. Instead of answering, the man struggled to open his eyes and fumbled with a trembling hand across the seat. Then he pulled out an inhaler. Alice realized she hadn't been mistaken and the stranger was having an asthma attack. She immediately unbuttoned the man's shirt collar to free his chest. The inhaler made a sharp, empty sound when pressed. "It's empty!" Alice cried out in horror. "I'll buy another one right now. Just hold on, please. Calm down. Try to breathe through your nose." Leaning against the steering wheel, the man nodded. Alice rushed across the road, ignoring honking cars, curses, and beeps. In an adrenaline rush, Alice didn't even look at the traffic light. The pharmacy was around the corner, a few minutes' walk away. The nurse burst into it, dishevelled, with wild, panic-filled eyes. "An inhaler, quickly! Someone is unwell!" she shouted, barely seeing the pharmacist behind the glass. Half a minute later, the terminal beeped, indicating the purchase had gone through. Alice rushed back to the parking lot just as quickly. Fortunately, the situation hadn't worsened, and the man was conscious. Before Alice's eyes, the illness began to recede. "I don't even know how to thank you," the man said when his breathing had recovered and his cheeks had flushed pink. "I had already said goodbye to life right here." "You shouldn't be so careless about your illness," Alice said, concerned. "Asthma can be fatal. It's better to buy inhalers in advance and always have them on hand. You scared me terribly." "With my workload, I sometimes forget my own name, let alone buy an inhaler." The stranger smiled awkwardly. "Well, yes, you're right, of course. You don't joke around with illnesses like this." He paused for a moment, looking at something on the dashboard. "Let me drive you home. It's already dark. It's not very safe to walk alone on the streets at this time," the stranger offered. Alice looked carefully at the man. "Are you sure you're feeling all right? Maybe with the driving?" She looked him up and down, as if fearing another attack. "I assure you I feel fine now and am quite capable of turning the wheel and pressing the pedals," the car owner smiled. "Oh, I suppose I'll agree," Alice sighed and nodded. "But please, go slowly." The car pulled out onto the street. Alice suddenly understood why she had agreed. She herself didn't feel entirely well. Suddenly the man slapped his forehead, so suddenly that the woman even flinched. "On the passenger seat. You saved my life, and I didn't even ask your name." The driver turned to her. "Nothing to say. Quite the gentleman." Alice smiled and told him her name. "Very nice to meet you. I'm Colin," her companion introduced himself in return. "Are you really a doctor?" "A nurse," Alice corrected. "I was just coming back from work when I stumbled upon you." A relaxed conversation started naturally, about work, about the beginning of summer, about miraculous rescues. The car pulled up to the entrance of the courtyard where Alice lived before she knew it. "Thank you for the ride," she nodded gratefully, getting out of the car. "Nonsense, I should be thanking you." Colin fumbled in the glove compartment. "Here, take this. If you need anything, call me. I'm always happy to help." He handed her a business card. "And you, please take care of yourself." He adjusted her hair. "It's not certain I'll be there next time." Instead of answering, Alice winked at him and nodded, showing that she promised to follow his advice. Only when the car disappeared into the distance in the light of a yellowish street lamp did Alice finally think to examine the business card she had received. The paper stated that in the parking lot she had saved the owner of agricultural machinery manufacturing, Colin Ryder. Mandy's morning began around noon. Her head was still buzzing from the champagne she'd drunk with her friend the night before. Bags from yesterday's shopping were piled on the bedroom chair. Roger had left early, and his side of the bed was already empty, cold. She needed to get going, get ready, and go to the salon in the evening to get her ends trimmed and her hair colour refreshed. She intended to be the queen at the upcoming engagement party for her husband's acquaintances. Half an hour and 2 effervescent hangover tablets later, there was no trace of the previous night's indulgence. Mandy sat on a high stool at the kitchen bar, drinking coffee and waiting for the fabric mask on her face to do its job. "I should check the latest news feed on my laptop, see who Roger's friend is and who he's throwing such a party for," the woman muttered to herself, clicking the mouse. A few clicks, and the internet obligingly opened the page of a young man named Michael Byron. After examining the content, Mandy understood that he and Roger had studied together at university and had recently reconnected actively after Michael bought a car at Roger's dealership. Michael had his own PR agency, as evidenced by the same photos in the business album. Mandy scrolled further and came across the young businessman's fiancée. Olivia, Well, she's not bad, interesting, Mandy commented to herself, looking at the miniature blonde in the photo. I'll have to pretend I know something about her. The mouse clicked again, scrolling through new virtual frames. A site opened that she could never have expected to see. Another photo, apparently taken in an expensive restaurant, showed Michael with his fiancée, an unfamiliar older man, and Roger's ex-wife. Mandy first peered closely, squeezed her eyes shut tightly, shook her head, and looked at the laptop again. Nothing had changed. The photo remained just as vibrant, and Alice in it was just as cheerful and beautiful. Mandy initially thought the photo was old and taken before Roger got married. However, the publication date of the photo eloquently stated the opposite, 7 months ago. "No, no way," the woman exclaimed loudly into the empty apartment. "This can't be." For about 10 minutes, Mandy was in a state of shock. She would look at the photo, then close it. Her experienced eye assessed Alice's dress, her jewellery, her hairstyle and makeup. All of this was definitely beyond a poor nurse's means. In the end, the apartment's owner tried to find out something about the man who was tenderly embracing Alice's waist in the photograph. But there was no tag on the photo, and Mandy couldn't find anyone similar in Michael's friends list. Curiosity and anger surged from somewhere. At first, the woman grabbed her phone and was about to call Roger, but she thought better of it in time. Her hysteria was unlikely to please her husband. The man didn't like talking about his ex-wife and past life, especially now that he held a high managerial position. But curiosity continued to gnaw at Mandy. Her ego was wounded. It didn't matter that she had stolen her husband, not at all. But looking worse than yesterday's ragamuffin, a former insurance worker, was truly terrifying. A small, red-haired boy sat on his grandmother's lap, listening as she quietly read him fairy tales from a colourful book. This touching scene unfolded right in the polyclinic corridor. Children in the waiting room were fussy, but the grandmother and grandson seemed not to notice any of it, sitting in the corner on a worn couch, lost in their magical world. "Alice, are you here?" someone called from behind. Having been lost in thought, the woman instantly shook off the blissful drowsiness that had come over her. "Are you all right?" Her colleague Tanya looked into Alice's face. Yes, sorry." The woman finally chased away her dreamy mood and turned to her companion. "Did you want something?" "Yes." Tanya irritably tossed her head. "My husband's on the phone, we're buying last-minute tickets, absolutely no time to wait, and Mrs. Lewis urgently needs her medical chart. Well, I can't find it. The reception said some of the shelves haven't been sorted after the rearrangement, and they're in the storage room on the lower floor near the trauma centre. Not as a favour, but as a friend, Alice. Help me out. Find that darn chart for Mrs. Lewis." Tanya thrust a piece of paper with the name on it into her hand and made a pleading face. "Okay, but you'll treat me to candy later," Alice agreed. "Anyway, I'm on break right now." Tanya beamed and happily fluttered away, hotly discussing something on the phone. Alice decided not to waste time at the reception and went straight to look for the medical chart in the hospital storage room. The trauma centre was on the first floor, but had a separate entrance. Alice quickly walked around the building and found herself near the trauma centre, where the reception room was on one side and the X-ray room on the other. The corridor wasn't empty. There were several people waiting, a high school boy with a bandaged arm, a man in his 40s pressing ice to his left palm. Alice walked past and was already reaching for the storage room door when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Danny, your hand is almost white. Take the ice off, or the doctor will think you have frostbite, not a fracture." The woman turned and met the eyes of the speaker. "Alice, is that really you?" Colin rose from his chair with surprised joy. Not even a couple of days have passed. It's a small world. The nurse laughed. How did you end up here? I hope the inhaler isn't involved. A pleasant warmth spread through her soul. Her previous encounter with Colin had left her with a pleasant feeling. It's like finding something long lost, but dear to your heart. No, not at all. My son was swinging his arms during football practice yesterday evening and swung them so hard he seems to have broken his fingers on the iron goalpost. Colin ruffled the hair of the boy holding the ice pack. We first went to the private clinic where we always get school certificates, but it turns out their X-ray machine is broken. They gave us a referral here. Well, and here we are, sitting and waiting. Oh, speedy recovery, Alice smiled at the boy. So what are you waiting for? Let me ask them to see you without a wait. No, we'll wait, Colin stopped her. You've already done too much for me not long ago. Danny is a real man now. He can wait. He's not a baby. He looked at his son, who in response puffed out his cheeks and furrowed his brows. Alice smiled. It was nice to see you, but work is waiting. She shrugged apologetically. She was about to leave when Colin stopped her. Alice, would you mind? Well, I'd like to invite you to dinner tomorrow, the man blurted out. Her cheeks somehow flushed. Okay, she forced a casual tone. What time and where? At 7 o'clock. Let's meet at the main entrance of North Park, and we'll decide there, Colin replied. All right, well, see you then. Alice awkwardly extended her hand to say goodbye. See you tomorrow, Colin also somewhat awkwardly but gently shook it. The necessary patient's medical chart was found surprisingly quickly. Alice diligently tried to focus on work, but her heart kept singing. The woman wasn't building any castles in the air, but she understood that men don't invite you to dinner just out of politeness. Colin liked her, and she liked him. And leaving the storage room 15 minutes later, Alice saw that Colin and his son were still waiting in the corridor. She lowered her head and cautiously slipped into the traumatologist's office anyway. Dr. Leo, Alice addressed the elderly doctor. There's a boy in the corridor with fractured fingers, a friend's son. Please do your best for him. I'll thank you. I won't forget. Alice, why didn't you say something? The doctor looked up from his papers and waved his hand. Of course we will. Call them in. Alice went out and motioned Colin and Danny towards the door. The man looked at her gratefully and hurried in with his son for the appointment. What a strangely wonderful day, Alice said to herself when she was back outside. It seemed to her that the sun was shining brighter. The flowers in the hospital flower bed were more lush, and the air suddenly smelled of hope and pleasant anticipation. That summer evening on the restaurant terrace by the park pond, Alice learned that the tactful and attentive man was a 30-year-old widower raising his son alone. Alice felt awkward asking her new beau about his work, and he himself didn't tell Alice for a long time that he managed a huge enterprise. Although the woman understood that the man courting her was far from being a student, she didn't fully grasp the extent of his wealth. But it didn't matter to her, because next to him she felt uplifted. Danny didn't warm up immediately, but over time Alice felt that her dreams of having children had suddenly come true. She enjoyed walking with the boy, holding his hand, buying sweets, praising him, or telling him stories. Colin would just smile quietly at such moments, watching how quickly the people dear to him got along. 4 months flew by like this. Despite her beloved's persuasion, Alice didn't agree to move into his luxurious apartment, although she often stayed over. Colin spoiled her with gifts and flowers. But having been burned once, Alice was still afraid deep down of losing her personal space entirely. But when Colin proposed to her in a restaurant right at his cousin's birthday party, Alice's heart finally melted. With tears in her eyes, she said yes. There were many congratulations, photos for memory, but the happy woman's eyes shone brighter than any jewellery. "How can I lose the one who saved my life but stole my heart?" Colin whispered in her ear as they danced in the semi-darkness of the banquet hall. In winter, a modest but elegant wedding took place, with only the closest people present. After that, Colin took his wife to the Azure coast, leaving his son in his grandmother's care. Alice secretly couldn't believe she could be so lucky, as if she had stepped into a fairy tale. The superstitious woman treasured her new happiness and didn't share many details with anyone, although she was questioned by friends, her mother, and former colleagues from work. And why former? Colin arranged for her to work in a prestigious private children's clinic where the pay was higher and the treatment was better. At first, he wanted his wife to take care of the home and herself, but Alice protested. She loved her calling and wasn't going to give it up. In the end, her husband paid for her residency so she could achieve greater results in her career. Alice sold the communal apartment she owned before marriage and put the money in the bank to earn interest, as her husband advised. And the cat lived with Roger, Max, and their family, a friendly and happy one. For a long time, Alice didn't want to tell Colin about her first marriage. It was uncomfortable, painful, and somehow shameful. Chance helped. One evening, the couple was returning home and half listening to the radio in the car. The announcer was enthusiastically telling listeners the news that a gang had finally been caught in the city that had been taking apartments from elderly people through various scams. "Well, they're taking the last from the elderly," Alice sighed, and then, not fully realizing what she was doing, she said, "How I sympathize with the poor old people. I was almost in the same situation myself." "Someone took your apartment in court?" A surprised Colin even turned to his wife. "And you kept quiet?" "Well, it was my ex-husband," Alice hesitated. "They helped us. In short, the apartment went entirely to him. By law, property should have been divided equally. Strange, very strange. In any case, I was unhappy in that apartment and was even glad to get rid of it." Alice forced a smile, trying to close the topic quickly. Colin was silent for a moment, then asked about plans for the upcoming weekend. "One less problem," her husband smoothed his moustache. He always strived to do everything honestly and openly. That's how he conducted business, how he interacted with partners, how he raised his son. And what had happened in his wife's life, even before he came along, made Colin's gut churn and compelled him to get to the truth. "What was I saying? You asked about the weekend," the man remembered. "You should go shopping, maybe buy a new dress." Alice turned to her husband and stared in disbelief. Colin loved her. He was a caring and attentive husband. But this, sending her shopping himself. "Oh, you're hiding something," she squinted slightly. "I am," Colin laughed, deliberately mispronouncing the word, my perceptive one. "Are we going somewhere?" Alice guessed. "Yes," the man confirmed. "Mike finally proposed to his mademoiselle. He wants to throw a party in 2 weeks. We're invited, of course, although I'd gladly just go to a bar with him instead of pretending to have social manners all evening." "Hey, why didn't we have an engagement party?" Alice joked. Colin looked at her as if the woman had just thrown a wad of cash out the window. "Because we're not crazy about TV shows like Mike's future wife. I bet she'll throw dinner parties and parties for any reason. Bought a new sofa, need to invite guests, got a dog, open champagne, hung a painting, launch fireworks." Colin got worked up. Alice couldn't help but burst out laughing. "What a grump," she said, wiping tears from her eyes. "What if it's fun and you like it?" "I hope so," the man agreed amicably. Well, in any case, you have to be my star at that party. So this weekend, I'll call Leonard. You can have him for the whole day. Let him drive you around the shopping centres and help carry the purchases." "I'll probably never get used to this," Alice murmured. "I can't accompany you on shopping trips myself, and I don't understand anything about it." Colin stroked her hand. "So let my trusted person be with you so I don't worry." All right, Alice agreed. She still felt awkward about receiving so much care and was shy about going into designer boutiques. However, her husband's confident voice and support were gradually helping her overcome this problem. Time moved forward. There was less and less time until the planned evening. Colin's work increased during the warm season as field work began and farmers started purchasing agricultural machinery. The man tried to appear at the enterprise and in the huge sales pavilion daily. The phone rang incessantly. Sometimes he needed to go to the bank, sometimes meet with suppliers of assembly machines, sometimes control purchases, sometimes sign papers. In such a rush, Colin almost forgot that Alice's birthday was just one day after his cousin's engagement party. The man had long decided that his wife should have her own car, as it wasn't always possible to call Leonard. Colin spent a long time choosing a car model for his wife, comparing and evaluating. In the end, he chose one but couldn't find the time to go and buy it. And when he looked at the calendar and realized he might not make it at all and completely mess up, he decided to combine business with pleasure. That day, representatives from the development and manufacturing plant were at the factory. When the materials were finally filmed and interviews were conducted, it was about 3:00 in the afternoon. Figuring there was nothing else to do, he just had to wait patiently and be careful on the road. The car ahead went to overtake a slow-moving truck. Colin was about to follow suit, but some inner intuitive feeling stopped him, and as it turned out, not in vain. A Kamaz truck appeared out of nowhere in the oncoming lane. The car that was overtaking swerved, trying to get back into its lane, but one wheel hit the shoulder. It spun and was dragged into the ditch. The truck screeched to a halt. Colin was already slowing down himself, simultaneously looking at the damaged car. By some miracle, it didn't flip on the steep slope and left deep ruts in the ground from its wheels, testifying to the driver's desperate attempts to save himself. Colin, without losing a second, hurried to the car. The truck driver followed suit. "Are you alive? Is everything all right?" Colin looked into the open driver's door window. A young man was sitting there. He was gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles were white, but fortunately he was unharmed. In the passenger seat, a girl was pressing her palm to her nose. Red drops dripped onto her t-shirt through her fingers. "Alive, thank God," the young man exhaled nervously, "although it felt like we weren't. The seatbelt saved us." "Did anyone break anything? Hit your head? I'll get the first aid kit." Colin looked around anxiously. "Broke my leg, but I don't know for sure," the girl said with difficulty, tilting her head back. "My face hit the dashboard." Colin made sure the couple didn't have serious injuries and hurried back to his car. At this time, the truck driver also approached the car, asked the driver something, and examined the hood from underneath. While Colin was helping the passenger treat the abrasions on her cheek, the driver of the damaged car and the elderly driver were tying a tow rope. "We'll pull your beauty out now," the old man gave a thumbs up, getting into the truck. "Just need a little push. It's turned around a lot." After a couple of minutes, Colin rolled up his shirt sleeves and began pushing the car from behind while the driver gave it gas. Grass and dirt flew from under the rear wheels, staining his jeans and sneakers. With a strained grunt, the car awkwardly turned and slowly crawled after its tow truck. When it was back on the road and the hazard lights were flashing, the old man turned off his iron horse, unhooked the rope, and threw it into the truck bed. "Well, off you go. Just go slower and head to the nearest workshop. Let them check the stabilizer links, brakes, and tires there," he instructed the young man who was thanking him. "Thank you so much." The young man shook the old man's hand. "It's nothing. Any self-respecting person would do the same," he replied. "Would you like me to drive you to the city, if it's on the way?" he offered. The girl, calling out to the old man who was still being thanked, whispered something to him. He nodded in agreement. Everyone said goodbye and finally got into their cars. The friendly villager turned off at the nearest corner, honking his horn 3 times as a farewell. Colin drove behind his new acquaintances. They reached the city, where the couple no longer needed escort or insurance. When Colin dropped off his passengers and finally arrived at the car dealership building, it was almost 5 in the evening. The man looked at himself in the rearview mirror and even smiled slightly. After a full day in the field and road adventures, he himself looked like he had come from the nearest village. His hair was dishevelled from the ditch, his jeans were stained with grass and dirt. But there was simply no time to change. After tidying himself up as best he could with wet wipes and water from a bottle, Colin took his wallet and headed for the entrance to the car dealership. "Cole, I've never been to events like this. I feel awkward," Alice whispered to her husband as soon as they entered the gate at the given address. The country villa where the party was held truly looked like it had stepped out of the pages of a glossy magazine. White walls with stained glass windows, 2 floors, a landscaped garden with white stone paved paths, a small garden, a lit-up pool around which several tables with food and drinks were arranged buffet style. Nearby, DJ equipment was piled up. Twinkling string lights and lanterns stretched across the entire territory, illuminating every corner. Guests who had already arrived stood here and there with glasses of champagne in their hands, chatting. Laughter could be heard. Men in trousers or jeans and shirts, ladies in evening dresses and heels. "You look better than anyone here. Stop it." Colin took his wife's hand and pointed to her reflection in the window glass. A slender, miniature brunette looked back at him with a beautiful, slightly messy bun, wearing a fitted white strap dress and bright emerald pumps, complemented by a clutch bag with embroidery of the same colour. She looked at her husband gratefully and smiled. Together they headed towards the pool, where most of the guests were. "You're late," Michael smiled welcomingly and hugged Colin. "Alice, you look gorgeous." Michael's fiancée, Olivia, appeared beside him. "Give me your hairdresser's number later." The relaxed social conversation was interrupted by a guest who approached Michael from behind. Michael turned around, replied something, and then addressed Colin and Alice again. "By the way, I've been wanting to introduce you to my cousin, also a university friend." Michael stepped aside, letting the approaching guests through. Alice gasped and clutched her husband's elbow. He, in turn, raised his eyebrows in a look of astonishment. The greeting he had not yet uttered hung in the air. "And this is my cousin Colin, owner of the Russ factory, and his wife Alice," Michael continued. Suddenly, his phone rang, and with a brief "excuse me," the host of the party hurried away to answer the call. Olivia was immediately whisked away by a group of her girlfriends. When Michael returned a minute later, his guests were still standing there, staring at each other. "Did something happen while I was gone?" he inquired. "We seem to know each other," Roger replied grimly. He felt Mandy stiffen beside him and the thin glass in her fingers almost shatter from tension. Roger recognized the same picky, rustic customer in the guest standing before him, and barely recognized his ex-wife in his companion. Mandy pressed her lips together. She saw that Alice looked nothing like a poor ragamuffin and felt that she had thoroughly put her foot in it. After all, her worst fears had come true. Both Alice's dress and shoes were more expensive and of better quality, and the ring with the impressive stone on her ring finger spoke more eloquently than anything else. "You know each other? Wonderful. Then you'll definitely have something to talk about. And the host urgently needs me. Enjoy yourselves and don't deny yourselves anything." Michael hurried away. "Well, lovely evening, isn't it?" Colin tried to ease the tension. He understood who was before him, but was in no hurry to show it. "Simply magnificent," Mandy hissed and kicked her husband's wrist. He winced, shifting from foot to foot. The situation was becoming increasingly idiotic. Fortunately for all four of them, someone behind the group awkwardly bumped into a string of lanterns, and it fell onto a table, taking a dozen glasses with it. The sound of breaking glass was heard. Taking advantage of the confusion, Roger and Mandy moved to another part of the yard. "If you want to leave, Colin squeezed Alice's hand. "No," the woman refused. "I'm not going to satisfy my ex-husband's ego." Colin kissed his wife's cheek and led her towards the table with drinks. Throughout the party, the couples kept their distance from each other and tried not to cross paths during contests or while socializing with other guests. The party was lively, with dancing, prize raffles, karaoke, and lots of jokes. In the midst of the celebration, Michael and Olivia announced that they were also inviting all guests to the wedding. "Oh, it's so hot," Alice sat on the edge of a small fountain in the garden. "I never thought such expensive shoes could rub my foot like this. It hurts." Colin knelt before her and helped her take off her shoes. "Yeah, that's a nasty blister. Okay, I'll get a plaster and some cold water and you stay here for now." "I won't go far anyway. With one shoe on?" Alice smiled and shrugged. The feeling of constraint after meeting Roger and his girlfriend had almost left her. The woman relaxed, dipping her hand into the fountain basin. It was almost midnight. The party was supposed to end soon with fireworks. "Relaxing?" Roger approached the fountain. "Let's say so." Alice stared at him warily. "Why are you here? I thought it was clear to everyone that we don't crave each other's company." Inside her, the usual knot tightened, cutting off the memories from her soul, but the woman forcefully pushed them away. "Oh, come on, Alice." Roger approached, reeking of alcohol, and smiled falsely. "We're on equal footing now. Why be enemies?" "I don't think your wife would like that idea." Alice nodded towards the main group of guests. "And I'm not going to ask her. I'm my own boss." Roger arrogantly tilted his nose up. Alice remained silent, just watching him with her eyes. Suddenly she felt so disgusted and amused at the same time. What had she seen in this smug turkey that she had spent nights worrying about after he left her? "Listen, let's forget old grievances." Roger came so close that Alice felt physically uncomfortable and instinctively moved away. Fortunately, Colin was already hurrying towards them along the path. "What grievances are we talking about?" He stood in front of Alice to shield her. "Perhaps about the fact that you used dishonest methods when dividing the joint apartment a year ago." Roger stepped back and froze, as if he had been hit on the head with a dusty sack. And Colin handed his wife a glass of ice water and continued. "Or perhaps about the fact that you and your employees should brush up on your sales ethics. About how to interact with clients who are not like you. So, what specific grievances did you want to discuss with my wife?" I'll go, excuse me," Roger mumbled. The alcohol he had drunk had turned the narcissist into a weed. The former car dealership director, stumbling, hurried away. What a pathetic wretch. Colin sighed. You should have taken your rightful half of the apartment. I have a proven and very strong lawyer. He'll tear someone like that to shreds. Cole, don't. Alice placed her hand on his forearm. I don't want to get back into that swamp. Let him choke on that apartment. Life will punish him itself. And how did you find out about everything? Colin sat down beside her, adjusting a few strands of hair that had escaped Alice's bun from her forehead. I told you I have a friend who's a lawyer, he squinted mysteriously. I used my resources, talked to the right people, dug into the case, and they showed me photos. I see, the woman drawled, glancing sideways. And what was that nonsense about cars and sales ethics? Oh, nothing. I was looking for a gift for your birthday, Colin admitted. A gift at a car dealership? Wait, don't tell me. Alice stared at her husband in astonishment, guessing the truth. Tomorrow, Colin laughed, hugging his wife. Leave me at least a little chance for a surprise. Claps sounded above their heads, and the sky lit up with bright red and yellow splashes. Alice watched the fireworks, and it seemed to her that tonight they were painting the night just for her. As if in these bright flashes, the old her had burned away, fearful, timid, and dependent on the opinion of a man who had never loved her. After some time, for Alice's sake, Colin also said goodbye to Michael and his fiancée, thanking them for the warm reception. Her foot still ached from the uncomfortable shoe. Even the miraculously found plaster didn't help. It still hurts to walk, Alice sighed, leaning on her husband. It's okay, we'll get to the car now. I'll carry you if you want, Colin smiled. Somewhere in the distance, Mandy's gloomy, dissatisfied face flashed, and next to her, Roger's drawn face. But Alice no longer cared about them. Colin gently opened the car door and carefully seated Alice right in the passenger seat. I feel a little dizzy, she said. You're lying, Colin couldn't help but say. Alice, why are you looking like that? My dear, you're feeling suddenly unwell. You've been drinking a lot of champagne for 2 weeks. You've gone off coffee, which is a good thing, Colin listed with a slight smile. It seems you've given yourself the main gift for tomorrow. Alice looked at him disbelievingly at first, then at her hands and her reflection in the rearview mirror. How did I not feel it? She murmured, and suddenly understood everything. Colin immediately hugged his wife tightly, stroking her hair. Let's go home, my joy, he said softly. The night city rushed past the car window, somewhere serene and already asleep, and somewhere still noisy and bright. Alice dozed off, resting her head on her husband's shoulder. But even in her sleep, a happy smile didn't leave her lips. Tomorrow would be a wonderful day, and after that, more and more. And each new dawn would be like this, when dreams quietly come true, and a beloved and loving person holds your hand.